let me get started. I've been at UWA for 2.5 years now, one pre-COVID year, so this was a good year, and the rest was, well, whatever it's going to be. WA is very, very different from the rest of Australia. And so what I thought I'd do today is give you a bit of a glimpse into the different parts that we are interested in here at UWA, and also give you an idea. It's sort of like a smorgasbord, but it gives you a bit of a biased idea in some ways, because the people I'm going to talk about, or the centres, are all places that either stand out by being different from other places in Australia, or that, and they also all have in common that I actually know these people relatively well and have had connections with them, either working directly or indirectly with them. So let me get started with one of the very big things we've got in WA, and that's we're part of ICRA here. This is the big International Centre for Radio Astronomy, and they are very, very interested in the Milky Way galaxy. There's a big opening, will be in 25, that when the new square kilometre array will actually start working. And the surveys they do up in the air, or up in deep space, I should say, are going to be fantastically big. So the preparation time for that is enormous. So what do I want to say about their centre? There are many, many different people. It's in collaboration with Curtin University and CSIRO within Australia. And there's a little map, which obviously you won't be able to read the detail, but it gives you an idea of the countries that are involved in the Square Kilometre Array initiative. And to give you a bit more of an idea, this place up here in the map is where the telescope actually is. Perth is down here, and this is about 700 kilometers north of us, in the middle of nowhere. When I first came to WA, it seemed quite small because the population is quite small. But since we've been fairly isolated and can't go anywhere, I explored part of that wonderful state. It's about a third in area of all of Australia, although the population is tiny. So the telescope is up 700 meters north, 700 kilometers north of Perth. This is an aerial view of the telescope. And they will be starting in 25 to actually point their telescopes up into the Milky Way. There are many, many collaborators there. Andreas Wojciech is one of the leaders in the data-intensive astronomy, which is probably the part that, from a statistics and computer science point, we're most interested in. The next group of people I would like to talk about is another big centre, and that is in plant energy biology. We have a lot of people working in genomics and proteomics, and unlike my previous two institutions back at the University of Adelaide, where we also did a lot of proteomics, but that was mostly medical research. Here, and that's again typically WA, they are interested in wheat, barley, and lots of other grains. I've worked with Harvey a little bit. He's got this fantastic centre. So in very short, one of the things they want to do, amongst other things, is make good bread and good pasta dough. So they need to look at the genes and the proteins and proteomes inside the wheat. But they do use a lot of mathematics and statistics. One of the big areas is the hierarchical clustering, which many statisticians would have used either as a black box or some other way. And what they want to produce is a map of all the proteomics that goes on in their data. And to use that, they use mass spectrometry, which gets very, very complicated very quickly, much more so than the genomics we are possibly much more used to. Harvey has a big centre and is working away quite extensively with a lot of different things, very exciting research. One of the very new enterprises is the Institute of Data that has started taking shape. Just very recently, we had the launch about 2 or 3 weeks ago. This is more an external facing organization where we're looking at data intensive industries again in WA. And it has essentially 3 pillars. One looks at the industry part where we would like to get money from industry in terms of collaborative research. And the person, E.J. Holden, who is a professor here at UWI in geoscience, and she also has a lot of contacts with Rio Tinto. She is the director of this new Institute of Data. She has a lot of connections. She has all her staff is actually paid by Rio Tinto. So she's obviously a perfectly good person to run this center. So the second part of that center is connected with us at UWI, providing information and knowledge to staff in industry, short courses, more the consulting rather than the research. And they sometimes come to our units. Some of them, when I first came, started doing our data science masters. Some of them just want specialized modules or a little bit of hand-holding in the simplest case. And the last part, which is probably the part which is least developed at this stage, is again focused internally at UWI researchers in order to get them more connected with industry. This is very much in its infancy. We have some sponsors, and maybe in a year's time I can tell you a lot more exciting things about it, other than showing you just the logo. Let's move on to the actual colleagues, and let's move closer to data science directly, where we actually not just provide the data, but actually work with the data. And I want, we have a School of Physics, Mathematical Sciences and Computer Science. And my colleague Wei Liu is one of the really important people in computer science who works with data science, and more specifically with natural language processing. She works with an engineer, Melinda Hodgkevich, who runs the ITDC Transforming Maintenance Center. What they are doing is looking at language processing. And they're particularly interested in web-based tool sets for knowledge discovery. So this is sort of schematically from Wei's webpage and her papers, what they're trying to do. They create these networks in order to get information from the textual data. This is data mining, of course, unstructured, and Wei, like myself as well, is very interested in visualization. So that plays a very important part in everything we do. And the two of them, with a lot of their collaborators, students, postdocs, and collaborators in other places as well, have developed quite extensive deep neural language models. I'll stop here talking about her work. If anybody wants to any of the links, if you want further information, please ask me later or send me an email and I can certainly talk more about that. Now, let's move on to statistics, and my colleague Ed Cripps. He works very closely with the ocean people. We have a big ocean institute here. Well, we're not very far from the ocean. As you can see, we're down on the map down here. We're a long, long way down here. It is a statistician with a strong interest in uncertainty and uncertainty quantification, Bayesian models, hierarchical models, also equations like the Navier-Stokes. So he's looked at, with a bunch of people, of course, from the UK, from the Oceans Institute here, and postdocs, PhD students, and quite a lot of local people around Australia. They looked at the dynamic processes in the ocean, and they want to develop and have developed probabilistic models, and in particular uncertainty quantification. That's important when we want to understand more what goes on around us. And it's not just that we want to estimate the surface currents, but we're also, or they are also looking at what is deep, deep, deep down there. And that looks very different. It's the dependence on the height, or the depth, I should probably say, in this case, going into the water, is amazing what happens down here and how different the currents are. So this is quite a lot of work that he and his various collaborators have done and are still continuing in connection with the Ocean Institute, that of course provides the data expertise that we as statisticians don't have. We'll stay with Ed a little bit longer and look at another area. This is very different. This is the spatial and temporal modeling of rainfall. And again, WA is a very interesting place. Most of you probably don't recall, because it's a little bit further away from you guys. We had very, very severe bushfires in WA in about February this year. This is a picture on the left here, 30 kilometers west of Perth from Uluru, where we had enormous bushfires. It was actually sort of getting close to threatening Perth, but 30 kilometers from the center is actually a long way out fast. 2 days later, this is the sort of thing you would have seen. So rainfall, fires, that comes and goes. We live in a fairly arid climate when we go a little bit further. What its interest here is, again, the quantitative uncertainty calculations, which you get from looking at daily rainfall over big, big areas in Australia, looking at what happens and then the effect of something like these bushfires. So this is prediction, and of course it goes towards climate change. The picture down here shows you in very schematic form with dates at the bottom here, the type of modeling they do, where they're looking at numerical estimates, the actual data they measured, and the estimates together with confidence intervals for their uncertainty calculations. And that is very important, that we don't just get a single number for what we do, but we actually get a feel and an understanding of how good are my estimates that I'm going to get. And the Bayesian modeling is obviously very important and very helpful in that direction. Right, a little bit about some of the work that I'm interested and involved in. You could call it statistical learning. Well, one big area was the proteomics, or is the proteomics mass spectrometry, which goes back to my previous research at the University of Adelaide and with colleagues who now moved on to Uni SA. So this is actually medical research where we're looking at ovarian cancer. We're looking at tissue samples, as you can see in the very left here. And with the tissue samples, they get at each pixel in a tissue, so something like 20,000 pixels in this little piece of tissue here, you observe mass spectra. And we're trying to analyze these mass spectra, which we can do from different points. You can look at maps at the different masses, because each spectrum is a continuous spectrum of masses or mass on charge values. So we can look at them as what we call feature maps, where we're looking at individual masses, or we can then look at cluster maps, where we're looking at the spatial contribution. This is a pretty bad one. The naive one typically doesn't work, and we've done quite a bit of work where we want to classify these cancer areas, which are circled in the picture on the left, and we want to find the other tissue slices. This is something even better, which we call the DIPS map, which gets you the best variables at the same time as giving you an idea of where the cancer may be spreading. These are what we call the DIPS maps, which they now use extensively in Peter Hoffman's lab at Uni SA. Right, and a little bit more on slightly more recent work, but work that actually started almost 10 years ago with Steve Merrin in the USA. This is data registration. And why is that important? Often when we observe data, it can actually get shifted. So in this case, we're looking at NMR spectra from 200 autism subjects. This is data from the US that's been collected there, and we got it from a colleague, Torben Kimhofer, who works at a local hospital here. These spectra look a mess. We have 200 curves in the underlying spectra here. They need to align them before they can actually make sense of the autism that they want. And the misalignment, and that's on the horizontal direction, comes from the fact that the measurement device gives them these results. So what we've done is looked at a method that was proposed by Steve Merrin and colleagues. Steve is a statistician and colleagues from optimization, where we look at non-linear warping functions. So the warping functions are the quantities which move each curve, each subject's profile around till they nicely align. And just to keep it very short, this is the final product. So we're going from the mess on the left, we're constructing these warping functions, we're going to the right. This is actually the work of my honor student, Michael Gerard, who's just finished and who's done an absolutely fantastic job with very, very difficult data, understanding, representing, and analyzing these very complicated data. Just a snapshot, and to give you a bit of an overview of what we're doing other than the research and the research centers, we also do a lot of teaching. And the main players in the data science teaching is Wei Liu, who I mentioned earlier from the language processing. She's the program chair of the data science. She's my counterpart in computer science. So we have a common data science major, an advanced major with a 4-year degree. We have a master in data science. We also run and continue to run data science research forums, which we've done a few times in 2019, less so in 2020, but restarting again, where we connect researchers from all over the university who work with data. And the final one was the Data Science Education Forum, which was inspired by Berkeley, and we had one of the leading people from Berkeley there, and we're now modeling some of our first-year data science on what they've been doing and run workshops on that. And on that note, I think I'll stop. Thank you.